Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Pandemic Punditry's panel on looking ahead, actionable insights from commercial real estate and hospitality markets. Thank you for joining us live on Zoom and on Facebook. Kathy and I would like to take turns introducing panelists from around the world. But before we get started, a couple of administrative items to get out of the way. We'll be having two polls, so we encourage you to obviously participate and we'd like to hear your thoughts on those. And if you have any questions, type them in the questions box in Zoom or in the comments section on Facebook. And we would like to take those questions throughout the session today, so keep those coming. And if you want to direct them to a particular panelist, of course, you can mention their name. Kathy and I would also like to thank Hatch for sponsoring this 10-part Pandemic Punditry series that we're doing. So thank you very much for that, Hatch. Kathy, you want to take over and start the introductions?
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining in, and thank you to our panelists. I'd like to take this opportunity to say hi to Mona. She's obviously the founder and CEO of Corporate Edge. So Mona, quick question for you. How did a Hindi and Urdu poet become an entrepreneur?
Hi, Karti. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Good evening. So I would say this would be the other way around. It was never a born poet. It was an entrepreneur who changed into a poet. It's the entrepreneurship which made me start writing poetry, and probably thoughts and emotions and a release. And I don't know from where I picked up Urdu, maybe from my great grandfathers coming in. And thanks to technology, where I don't have to pen down anything and it's autotyped through the phone. So usually my thoughts pen down very easily, and it's all Hindi and Urdu. But I love it. It's almost like 70 poems I've already written. And once I reach the 100 mark, I'm gonna get a book published and maybe an audio version as well, because not too many people like to read Hindi and Urdu. So that's where it is.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Jeevan, I think Jeevan needs no introduction for the audience in Sri Lanka, but he's the founder CEO of Hatch and Orion City. And Jeevan, the question that we have for you is, what inspired you to start Hatch? What or who inspired you to start Hatch?
I think about 4 years ago, I was very involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we were basically trying to see what are the needs of the ecosystem, and we conducted a survey through Slascom, my role in Slascom, and we basically found one of the needs is affordable workspaces, and that really was kind of the initial, impetus to start Hatch, which is basically to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Sri Lanka.
Great.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Lavi, you want to introduce Yash?
Yeah, so Yash, has about 30 years of experience in this area. He's joining us from the UK, where he's based out of. He was head of corporate solutions here at India. That's when I met him. And Yash, the question we have for you, one is just give us a little quick overview of your role within IFM GLL, but also for the benefit of the audience, maybe explain what integrated facilities management entails. Just a little quick definition would be helpful.
Sure, Lavi. Firstly, I'll thank you for just sharing such a flattering picture of me. That was clearly when I had access to a hairdresser and I had more hair. So thank you very much.
I will take credit for that, Yash. Thank you very much.
Karti. Look, I'm the COO of the JLL's integrated facilities management business across EMEA. And I also run we recently acquired an engineering company within the UK with about 4,000 engineers. So I'm also the managing director of that business. As you say, I've been in the business for 30 years, and the integrated facilities business, that's effectively how we manage multiple different work streams to deliver a integrated solution to our customers, be it a small local retailer or a global corporate. So that's the role of service we deliver. And as I say, it's nice to be present in India again. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful to have you.
All right, Mandeep, thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know Mandeep, he is the president of HVS Anrock. They're the equivalent of McKinsey in the region. And Mandeep, just a really quick question for you. So what has HVS Anrock's role been like during the pandemic and the lockdown? And do you see that role changing or evolving during this pandemic, or post this pandemic rather?
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me onto this panel, and a very good afternoon to everybody who has logged in from various parts of the world to listen to us. I hope we can add value and make it worthwhile for all of you. HVS is a global leader in hospitality consulting. I handle the South Asia portfolio for HVS. And what we've been doing really during this pandemic is really trying to decipher the impact that it's having on the region, largely in India. And we've been trying to do a whole lot of reports and analysis of what we think this will do to the industry, how it's likely to impact the industry, and what the industry can do to sort of mitigate or at least help the industry to come out of this through studies that we are putting together of past incidents, which could help in putting together some of the thoughts that the industry could have moving forward. It's a very dynamic situation as the pandemic sort of grows and things are changing and evolving. So we are trying to keep pace with whatever's going on, trying to make it simpler for a lot of people to understand on what could be the likely impact of this. So a lot of work in terms of putting reports out, putting data out, putting some research studies out, and surveys that we're doing for the industry, and preparing solutions for the industry to help them once the lockdown is over.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mandeep. Lavi, you want to introduce the accidental hotelier?
Hi, Malik. Good to have you on the panel. I think Dilma has put Sri Lankan tea on the market, and it's a global brand today, thanks to the efforts of you and your family. I, very curious to find out. I think most people do not know or may not know that you built a small chain of ultra luxurious boutique hotels that are comparable to some of the finest in the world. So my question to you today is what was the inspiration, motivation, and the rationale maybe for starting such an ambitious undertaking?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My brother and I have tea in our blood, obviously. And the tea country in Sri Lanka is, in my view, the most beautiful, authentic part of the country. And then, we've been living up there, and you see these landscapes, which a lot of people, certainly tourists, weren't aware. They put Sri Lanka into a box, beaches and cultural triangle, but the tea country was pretty unknown. So I saw these colonial, historic tea planters' bungalows kind of falling into rack and ruin. You had one planter rattling around a huge house. So we sort of consolidated some of the accommodation and took 5 of these 5 to 6 room villas and converted them to lodges in the style of Relais Chateau, which is this French association of country inns that are, owner managed, like you might see in New Zealand. Or because for me, that is the vision of tourism that Sri Lanka should pursue, and not necessarily massive big hotels. There's a role for that as well. So it was really the tea connection that led me to the segue to tea tourism, and that worked well. So we expanded beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful.
So Fateh, hi, thank you for being here with us. Obviously, Fateh is the co-founder and CEO of YohoBed, and he started PickMe. So Fateh, the question I want to really ask you is, after co-founding something like PickMe, which is one of Sri Lanka's most successful companies and also known as Sri Lanka's Uber, what prompted you to start YohoBed?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. for inviting me and for this panel. So let's say I always wanted to build a company that will expand beyond Sri Lanka, and Pygmy is my, let's say, the fourth company which I was built. Let's say by the time we came to some point, or by the time we were leading in the country, the world or the other parts of the world, there are bigger players already, and which gave very thin opportunity for us to get into other countries. So then I was looking at another industry or another upcoming product which I can get into and take or build a company which can expand to other countries. So that's why I selected a very similar kind of OYO kind of a model. We replicated or localized, hyper localized in Sri Lanka, which we had the route to go to other countries in the world.
Okay, great. So I think Shanta, so very interesting life story. I mean, you started at the front desk of the Hotel Ceylon Intercontinental, and then went right all the way up to the front office where you head of resorts in Thailand and Indonesia. And I mean, I think you had a nearly $1 billion Aussie dollar budget, and 8,000 employees and 100+ hotels to manage. Why did you, my question is, why did you take early retirement to start Plus One? What prompted you to do that? What motivated you to do that?
Thanks for the introduction, Yas, and thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. Good evening from Sydney, Australia. I think you're flattering me more than I deserve. I've had an illustrious career, but I loved every moment of it. And my lifelong passion has been about inspiring people and transforming organizations. And I always look forward to being able to impact communities and people more. But more importantly, to pay forward through what I have benefited throughout my career. Like you quite rightly said, I started as a trainee in front office at the Intercontinental in Colombo and went on to manage a $1 billion business within the Intercontinental Group. And I want to enable others to do the same. And I thought the best way to do that was to branch out and go beyond the confines of one company. And when the opportunity came up to take early retirement once we moved to Australia, because we've been pilgrims for 25 years, going from place to place, I jumped at the idea and really look forward to being able to pay forward to communities and people and inspiring them and helping them grow in their careers and becoming leaders like I've learned from others.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a great story. So I think the next what we would like to do, Karthika and I, would be to sort of give a little bit of context in terms of sort of where we are and the subject that we're about to open up and have a panel discussion on. And I think it's really hard not to ignore the fact that the reason we're doing this virtually and the reason we're talking about this subject is simply because we are right in the midst of an economic recession, global economic recession. Some want to call it a depression, but whatever the nomenclature that economists want to put on it, it's clear that we're in the middle of one. So the question that's on the mind of all pundits and people that you listen to on the news is, what kind of a recovery? Obviously, you want to focus on the recovery. What kind of recovery are we expecting, right? So this whole concept of, you may have heard, is it a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped one, a W one, or an L-shaped one? And each of these recoveries obviously has different impacts on the respective businesses that all of us sort of manage, own, or work for. So I think it's useful to sort of, and I think the advice that most people are giving is, given that we're right in the midst of anything, I mean, nothing is sort of known beyond speculation, that you should prepare for one or more of these scenarios at minimum, and depending on the industry that you're in. So later down the panel, we can ask, or you can ask the panelists, what kind of recovery scenario are they looking at in terms of, say, the hospitality or the commercial. The next sort of thing we would like to speak about is the commercial real estate market. Now, this is a broad market, right? So we picked co-working because we have panelists who can address that directly from their experiences, but also because there's been a trend in the last, say, 5-10 years, where we've seen the growth of these flexible offices, right, or co-working. And the need for that, the demand for that is being grown largely from the fact that in the last 10 to 15 years, 60 to 80% of the jobs within any economy has been from small businesses. So there's been a driver for that. I mean, there are things like the new accounting standards that came out last year that says if you have a lease period of less than 12 months, it can go off your balance sheet as a liability. So this OPEX versus CAPEX thing. There are a lot of other areas or reasons why, and these are some of the drivers. I'm not going to read through the slide, that have propelled that market. So let's talk about, ask our panelists those questions and talk about that, because given that all of us are stuck at home, this whole concept of work from home has become sort of an entrenched thing. So the question is, what impacts does that have on commercial real estate in general and co-working in particular?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the, in the statistic that says 60 to 80% of jobs within the economy were, accounted for by small and medium-sized businesses. But we can come back to that.
Good point. So thanks to HVS Anurag on this. I think this graph is really, the pictorial is very compelling for at least for us, Kathy and I. So they've sort of tracked the impact of this pandemic across the various hospitality markets. And what sort of stood out, obviously, and I'm sure you can see this as well, that while India is obviously going to be impacted pretty dramatically, just like the rest of the world, that it is sort of the bright spark in this whole map. I mean, it's growth maybe projected to be 3.6 as opposed to say China, which is at 0.2, or in other countries which are already in the minus category, right? So I think we can obviously ask Mandeep to sort of talk more on this, but just want to give some data points to the conversation so that our audience and as well, of course, our panelists being experts are aware of sort of the ground that we are laying here. Yeah.
And I do believe there's a poll that's gone on live now, so everyone can just chime in your opinion.
Yeah, so we put a poll out there, and so please respond to the poll. So, okay, so let's sort of dive into the panel. I'd love to get everybody's thoughts on this. This was a headline that came on the 30th of April, and it's pretty compelling. So Mona, I mean, first reactions. What do you think of this headline? This push by Tata Consulting Services to say by 2025 to have 75% of their people working from home.
It doesn't scare me at all. I would say offices are there to stay, and it is a very good call from TCS though to have 75% of people working from home, because that's the kind of business they are in and they can very well work from home. These COVID pandemic times, I think, have really got us into thinking how working from home could be made useful. But definitely there's going to be a trend which will emerge out of this, where we'll have to remodel our working style. And definitely one will look at three things happening out of this. One of them will be a very happy group which will be working from home, because they don't really have to be there out into the business scenario, so to say. And the second will be where they would need flexibility. They can work from home, but they need to have flexibility to come out. And for a few days, they need to work out from the office as well, because those days they cannot sit at home and work. It will not work for them. So we are redesigning and remodeling our own serviced office spaces with coming up with new products, so to say. So something like a work from home plus is emerging out of this trend, I would say. And the third category,
that's a very interesting way to put that. Yeah, good.
Yes, and the third category of people would be who cannot sit at home and work, for sure, because that's what business demands. So, but we did think through, because of these times, how is it and what's going to happen? And as I said, work from home plus will be where you reach out to people where they would need flexibility. Then we're also looking at something where people would require a remote HQ, COVID relief remote HQ kind of a place, which will be hubs closer to where you stay. You don't have to travel a lot, but the entire thing of consolidating real estate space and having everybody sit out of one office will not be there for times to come now. And people will have to de-densify, and people will have to move into various locations, so to say. And this is what we foresee. But offices going off or real estate getting impacted negatively, I don't see that happening at all. Yes, it will take a couple of months to, for everybody to get used to, because it was a time where everybody had to get used to working from home as well, and it was becoming very challenging for a lot of people. But I'm sure once we go back, one will basically look at a lot of, I would say, health and safety measures, a lot of technology coming in, and these are the things which the world will move on to, a lot of automation, a lot of artificial intelligence, which will come in. So this is what.
I want to address, just take an audience question on Mona's point. Yeah, so we have a question from, I believe, Lobby Salon. Didn't IBM, Yahoo, and others try this out and reverted? And what can you learn from that, this sort of flexi working thing?
Sorry, come again? Didn't they try?
Didn't IBM, companies like IBM, Yahoo, and stuff try this out before COVID, where they were giving employees the ability to work from home partially and work from an office, and then they kind of reverted back? So what lessons do you think we can learn from that?
I would say they would have, they did go back and they had to bring back their employees back to work. Purely because there are challenges with internet bandwidth, there are challenges with security, which one needs to really think about. And then there are obviously challenges on performance management for people who are sitting at home and working. But I think change is really required. And the way I foresee is that definitely we'll have a huge set of people who would relatively be okay sitting at home and working, which means that there is an opportunity for providing a work from home office as well. And I look at that as a positive thing, that people like us who are into a serviced office scenario, or who provide the back end, a ready to move and managed office space, could even provide you with all the required infrastructure for you to work from home as well. So it will be a mix and match of everything. I don't foresee any challenge. Yes, we will have to work on technology for sure. We will have to secure data and all those other things. But yeah.
Is Mona's thinking consistent with yours as well, Jeevan? I mean, because you're also in both spaces. Actually, you have commercial real estate, 1 million square feet at Orion City, and you have 60,000 at Hatch with 900 potential seats there. What are your thoughts on this? And while the slide is up, why don't we put the next one up as well on what Barclays is saying, so we can add to the sort of the conversation. So this is Barclays saying, hey, look, I don't think putting 7,000 people in a building, there's going to be impacts to the financial district area in Canary Wharf because of this, but in the UK. But Jeevan, what are your thoughts on these companies' statements around, hey, we can't be all cooped up in an office anymore, or in one single location?
Yeah, I think to build up on Mona said, there's going to be all kinds of businesses, and there's hence there's going to be all kinds of solutions, right? Some may be able to 100% adopt a work from home solution, but there will be others where there will be people that have to come into work and prefer to come into work, right? But just looking at from the traditional office side and what I see, companies like Tata and the point of performance and security are two very important points, right? So today, even though they are working from home using Citrix and remote login and disabling the USB ports and stuff like that, it's not maybe strictly following ISO, the security procedures, because your
Did we lose Jeevan there? But there was also...
Yeah, it looks like we lost Jeevan.
So he'll come back on. There was also a question from the audience asking, is the open plan office, and I'm sure all of us have worked in one of those or is a part of those, is the open plan office dead? And this is from one of the audience members on Zoom. it doesn't have to be the real estate people on the panel, but what are the other panelists' thoughts on the concept of this open office, which was obviously, so I mean, there was somebody who also told me the other day that, hey, this may be an opportunity for commercial real estate to actually grow, because with social distancing and these new rules about, open offices being not so great, will the old big cubicles come, will the offices come back, and therefore you'll need more space, not less space. So Jeevan, that's what we were asking, whether, these open plan offices, was the question, are those open plan offices dead now, Jeevan? And, are you and Mona considering, rejigging some of these things, or are you relying more on sort of the safety precautions and things that you're doing? Because, I mean, that's a big ask to sort of redo a building is not an easy task.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped out. Can you hear me now, or?
Yes,
Yeah, we can hear you, Jeff.
Okay. So as I was saying, I think, looking at kind of companies like TCS and, what their requirements are, it's really around performance and security. And I think performance we can solve. There are various ways when you log into an online system where you can solve the performance side of it. But security is an issue, right? So I think if you look at there are ways now you can remotely log in to Citrix online. You can do the submits. You can do the removing the USB connections, etc., on the computer. But I think in the future there's going to be more technology being used on the security side. So there's going to be obvious access into your video camera at home to monitor how many hours you're putting in front of the computer screen, right? Then there's going to be stuff like if you're using using recognition. So if you're moving your mobile phone to take pictures of a particular confidential information, the screen cuts off. Or if there's someone looking over your shoulder, you can use, again, AI and stuff like that to really address the security concerns of going online. So I think that's a huge opportunity right there, right? How do you provide security for people working from home for these kind of companies? And also, I think going further, I think on the performance side, I think you want to enable your employees' performance wherever it is. And I think employees at some point will want to go into a community and be part of a productive community where they can have discussions and stuff like that. So I really think if you're able to provide community access, whether it's closer to the places where they work from, or if you're able to provide that kind of expertise or that enabling environment, whether it's from a co-working space or whether it's online, I think that's going to be a huge area of focus as well. So I think providing that.
Let me put a question that actually maybe the hospitality experts also can answer. Karthik, if you mind putting the Marriott and the Airbnb thing up there. So if you're from a co-working standpoint, so the hospitality industry is obviously sort of saying, okay, I mean, how do we ensure that with high throughput, in this case, they at least stay a night or 3 or 4 days or a week in the same place. In your case, hot desking means there could be just a day there. But so they're putting new guidelines. As Airbnb's come up or is proposing some guidelines. Marriott, which is doing this, everything from disinfectant protocols to hand sanitizers and all kinds of things that they're doing. I mean, is to assure people that the spaces are clean? Are we looking at new HVAC systems? Sort of taking out the bad air, opening out the windows, that kind of thing. Using sprayable nanotechnology stuff. So I mean, these disinfectants are great, but you could also actually spray stuff on surfaces. And I think there's a Sri Lankan company that's done that. Swintech, I think, has done that, where you can actually put a coating, a nanotechnology coating that repels these microbes. So there's obviously a technology solution. So what impact? I mean, Mandeep and others, is this? I mean, how are you going to get customers, whether they are going to a co-working facility or a commercial office, or to a hotel, what are the new standards of hygiene and safety and sanitization that you're thinking about, and what specifically, Mandeep, are you recommending that people do? And then please, Fatih, as well as, I know Fatih, you probably have some challenges because you're like the OYO for Sri Lanka and the world. You're working with partners who are very much like Airbnb, who are not traditional hotels. So how do you make sure this happens? And Yash, I think there's an opportunity here from you as well. Would you need somebody from integrated facilities management to sort of see whether this stuff is done properly? So this is not a core expertise of hotels, I would think, or co-working spaces. So somebody in facilities management, is this something, there's an opportunity for a company like JLL to sort of say, hey guys, we've looked at all the world standards and we can come and audit this. We can actually provide services around this. I don't know. I'm not putting it out for discussion. Anybody?
Shall I go first?
Definitely a new standard in hygiene will evolve. I think there's going to be a lot more awareness and need for hygiene. And also, I think future travelers are going to look for that assurance. And that's where the brands will have an advantage of providing that assurance from a global perspective. I think cleanliness will need reinvestment. Systems will need reinvestment. And we'll also need the technology to do that both in hotels and in shared spaces. I think that's going to be the new norm. And that's probably going to be a key factor in customers choosing their travel and their choice of stay for the future. Just to go back to the previous point, I think the working from home will also probably encourage more open plan and more hot desking, because that's a combination of the two that might become the norm. But having said that, we also need to be mindful of the social needs of human beings that need and emotional needs that need to be supported during the working from home phase, because they have an innate need to be part of a community as well.
Yeah.
Yash?
Yeah, certainly from cleaning standards and cleanliness, hygiene, etc. Clearly, it's going to change. But if you look at behaviours and how we need to manage maybe the next 18 months, I think there is an opportunity to establish a standard for different types of workspace and different types of, for example, would the same standard apply in a reception area as it would in a lift lobby, within a lift, in an office, and so on. So I think there are some common sense things we can all do. I don't think we need to make a science out of it. I think it is common sense. You clean the dirtiest areas first, the areas with the most touch points first. And we've certainly seen customers in the UK in particular looking at different methods to how do you use a lift, and how do you push the buttons on a lift, how do you enter a lift, what's the separation in lifts. So I think the cleaning standards will definitely need to ramp up. But I think in the whole scheme of things, I think it will be short term, the next 12, 18 months, until we can get some real vaccine out there, and maybe longer. But frankly, I would say I don't think we need to over-engineer this. We have everything we need to do this. You need to find and agree what's the best solution for your space and apply it accordingly.
Yeah, I'd like to actually hear from Malik as well, if he's open to commenting on this. With a relay chateau type model, Malik, how do you kind of foresee? Obviously, it's already exclusive. So from that point of view, you're probably better off than the larger chains?
Yeah, I mean, our resorts are generally, relay chateau resorts are isolated. They're in rural areas and consumers are craving a connection with nature. So there is that built-in physical distancing also is already there. But the issue is the connectivity, obviously the air travel, the internal travel, how you connect all the dots. Now, if we assume that we have this level of infectiousness, this level of inability to deal with the pandemic, then on an ongoing basis, then obviously we've got to do all this re-engineering, which is going to cause massive disruption. But I really feel that, this kind of pandemic we really weren't geared for. I think Bill Gates, there was something I saw about him warning about this back in 15 or 16. The amount of money spent on dealing with something like this is tiny. The White House shut down their pandemic office. So I really feel that, we can plan for all these things. But as Yash also said earlier, I wouldn't overthink it for the moment, because, if we put 2% or 5% of defense expenditure into science, into fighting the pandemic, it could be a very different situation 6 months from now. So we can plan, but if we have to operate the way people are envisaging, things are going to be pretty miserable. Things like more people working from home. Okay, we all know that, working from home, McKinsey, I was reading somewhere, says that deep work, when you're not in an office, you're 5 times more productive. So there may be other reasons why that move to working at home, and the fact that you've had in 5 or 6 weeks, 5 years of innovation has cascaded forcefully into 5 weeks, like the tea auction in Sri Lanka. For the last 150 years, it's been done the same way. The last 10 years, they've been trying to automate it. They never succeeded because the seniors, refused to get in front of a computer. But because of the lockdown here for the last 5 weeks, we've had 2 auctions that very successfully took place online. So that innovation, I think, is a good thing. But I honestly feel that an impediment to this is that you've got all these populist leaders, I won't name them, 3 or 4 of them, who essentially don't believe in science. But if you have more of the Merkels of this world, probably 12 months from now, you'd have a quintupling of investment in science. And I think we'll get on top of this thing, because if you've got to assume that we've got to be so paranoid about catching COVID, life really isn't worth living. So we can do all this planning, but I really feel that we've all got to focus on the science, because we know that not enough money has been spent. And already in 2 months, there's been a lot of development. So whether the vaccine is in September this year or September next year, I think human beings are going to forget how bad things were. I hope we don't go back to where we were before. But I tend to be optimistic. We can plan, but I really think that it's got to be a midway house once we get on top of some of the particularly negative aspects of the virus in terms of vaccine, antibody testing, herd immunity, and so on.
So Malik, you're banking on predominantly science and technology, right? So
I'm not banking. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not banking on it. We've come out with a 70-point COVID clean manual, and I think it's probably the first hotel group in Sri Lanka, although we're probably one of the smallest. So this is something we're already training our ambassadors on. It's a very thorough protocol. And so where, you plan for the worst, but, you hope for the best. So I really think we'll end up in a midway scenario, and we've got to do what we can to manage for the next 12 months. So if you look at air travel, for example, I'm on the board of Sri Lankan Airlines, and we're really grappling with some of the issues because, airlines are grounded, and you hear Emirates, Tim Clark said yesterday that 85% of airlines will go bankrupt in the next 12 months. How do airlines deal with physical distancing, economy class, one middle seat in, your load factors will drop by about 20%. But, if that has to happen, air travel as we know it will grind to a halt. So I'm kind of looking at the middle view. You prepare, but I think governments of the world and the private sector should lobby a far more significant investment in science and technology, and also lobbying to prevent a recurrence of the kind of way that this whole thing started through maybe a traditional practice, but it's very important that we do not allow further crossing from, animal kingdom to the humans. I think that's a much better investment than all of us spending billions and zillions on reorganizing everything.
I agree.
Because that's, that's more influence and focus.
That's a fair point, Malik. That's a fair point. So just going back to Mandeep, I remember in your sort of intro, you said you're preparing solutions for the industry based on the data that you gathered. And that kind of brings us nicely into an audience question where I think Shayan has asked the question, what should be the main center of focus for future hospitality startups, as well as what role technology will play for the industry in the days ahead? And Mandeep, perhaps you can comment on that, and then we can get some comments from Fatih as well.
Sure. I've been listening, very intently to all the panelists, and I think everyone's making a lot of sense in what they're saying. But in my opinion, there are 2 kinds of things, 2 kinds of changes. One are clearly the short-term changes, which we're going to have to adapt till the time the vaccine comes out, which is in terms of the hygiene standards in hotels is going to be very different. Not that hotels were not hygienic earlier, they were very, very hygienic, but you just have to step up the game with what we are, just the hand that we've been dealt with. And the second part will be consumer behavior, which is going to change in the long term. And there's going to be a fair amount of long-term change. While I do believe that once the vaccine is out, human memory is fairly frail and it'll be business as usual. But I'm not a believer that everything will go back to the normal that we had earlier. I think some bit is definitely going to change for the simple reason that we now are clearly believers of the fact that this could happen again. It's not going to be another 100 years before the next similar sort of situation comes. It could be a lot sooner. And therefore, as an industry, we must take cognizance of this and plan our hotels accordingly. And I think some of the consumer behavior is going to change. For example, even in the short run and in the long run, I think housekeeping is going to change dramatically. Business hotels, for example, where the average length of stay is 1.5 days, 2 days, I think that the consumer is not going to want housekeeping. He won't want his room to be serviced or his bed linen to be changed or even his bath linen to be changed if he's staying one night in the hotel because he doesn't want anybody to come to his room. So, evening service is going to be dead and buried. No one's going to come to, kind of fold your bed sheet or your quilt. That's not going to happen any longer, or just freshen up your room. So those kind of changes are certainly going to happen in the SOPs of hotels. I think hotels must also learn that they need to become less cost intensive. They need to have fewer people working, especially in the Asian context, where our staff ratios tend to be much higher. We need to bring our costs down. We need to rationalize, the whole operation of the hotel, given the situation that we're in and how these things are going to unfold or could unfold in the future. Coming to technology, I think technology adaptation, and I've just done a story for Hotel Magazine in the US on trends that are going to happen post-COVID. I think we will see technology adoption in the hotel industry like we have never seen in the past. This is an industry which has been very slow to adopt technology compared to other industries. And this is going to be the turning point where you're going to see huge amounts of technology adoption. In my mind, those fantasy stories or visuals that we saw where robots were delivering room service is a reality. It's going to happen as soon as 2020. Mark my words. And it is something that you will see happening. Because, some of this is going to stay. And this is, like I said, this is the turning point for the industry to adopt technology, to reduce the workforce. Because one of the biggest blows that we are faced with today when we are disrupted in this manner is how do we manage such a large workforce. And therefore, technology is going to, and of course, we want, contactless stuff. We're going to try and build stuff which is contactless. We're going to try and do our SOPs which bring as little contact as possible. And these are things which are going to happen. I can, rattle out a whole number of things, but we're limited in time. But suffice it to say two things. There's going to be a short-term impact where I think, like Shanta said, brands are going to play a very important role. The equity of brands are going to be very significant when the customer is making his choice. There are going to be challenges for the aggregator business, the Airbnb kind of model. There will be some challenges because the customer is looking at the security which he's going to get from the equity of brands who display that kind of confidence in the customer's mind. So that's the short-term bit. The long-term is that we're going to have to adopt technology and we're going to have to change some design inside our hotels for the longer term. And this is my take, stepping out in the future with what's happening in COVID. So we've done, just to complete this, we've done a sort of, again, an SOP on what hotels can do once they open their hotel for COVID, the reopening of hotels and what they can do. We've also done a sort of a guest manual, which you can hand over to the guest to know exactly what to expect when he gets into the hotel. What are the changes that he can expect when he gets into the hotel? Because it's no longer the same hotel that he used to visit. And he will also have to make some changes as the hotel makes the changes.
So I think Pati might be jumping a bit to get in here for that comment on that Mandeep made about the aggregator hotels, right? And the brands having a better time. Fatih, what is your reaction to that, and what are your plans? Sort of,
so let's say being a tech company and working with small and medium SMEs hotel sector it's actually giving us quite a lot of dynamics and a lot of benefits and disadvantages as well. Right? So, but how we have thought through all this area is, let's say, let's say the East attack actually gave us a little bit of a sense of how the market might convert, or how SME will look upon this. So then after that, we actually kept our team and the tech very dynamic to market effects. So we have been identifying, or we have been closely understanding what kind of changes might happen. So we also identified there can be opportunity for people to come and work in the hotel in the morning to evening instead of working from home sometimes. Let's say we feel that there can be a challenge. We need to provide, as a technology provider, we need to facilitate the sterilization for hotels, or the small and medium hotels. So on that way, we will be able to control whether these small and medium properties or the accommodations were properly cleaned and hygiene. So we, as a tech company, we are so focused on bringing a technology solution that will change according to the dynamics after during of COVID. So also we know this. Let's say if the vaccine takes about 12 to 18 months, 24 months, which is quite a long period in an age like this, and people's behavior is going to change drastically, right? So we also, let's say, as a company, we also might need to pivot quite a bit even in tourism or the hospitality industry. We might need to look for different kind of businesses or different kind of use cases will appear. So let's say we are open for it, and we are looking at. I think we have already done so many pivots, and we are keeping our team also very dynamic to pivot according to the market changes, what will happen. So right now it's very hard to predict. No, this is going to happen, that is going to happen.
But so I think
will,
what you're saying is you're willing to pivot on a dime if required. I think we took a poll earlier, Karthika. You want to share the results of that poll, and you might want to say what the question was and what the results were.
Yeah, so we took a poll earlier, which was basically to understand how soon after the lockdown would, our audience members take a vacation, right? So we had a 15% saying immediately, 20% saying within 3 months, 31% saying within 6 months, and 36% saying not for the foreseeable future. So Yash and Mandeep, is this kind of consistent with the data that you guys are also, finding,
or is our audience a lot more adventurous than the average public?
If you really see this data, over 60%, I think, of people are saying that they're not going for a vacation in a hurry.
Right, that is true.
And just as a comparable trend from the real estate sector, we did a survey of when the restrictions were taken down, of the relaxation to the lockdown in Europe. How many people should come back to work, and I think our clients came back with saying only 35% needed to come back to work, because other work could be done at home. But when they asked that poll of the 35%, how many people want to come to work, it was 2%. Yeah. So, I think there is going to be a slow comeback, and it's about, I think, communities like ourselves giving our occupants and our customers confidence that it can be safer. But I don't think it's in our hands. One of my colleagues, earlier said that, I think it was Malik saying that, we've got to rely very heavily on governments to really drive this and help us, because, we've got to, improve consumer confidence regardless of what they do. I saw one of the questions come up earlier, from one of the guests, asking, about lifts and how can you make sure that you can keep lifts safe, because the virus may be airborne. frankly, in London, I'd be more worried about getting on a packed tube train. So if you look at, you're going to be, there's no way you can solve for every single circumstance, but you've got to be practical and moreover be balanced in your approach to solve this.
Mandeep, do you have any comments on that? Or?
No, I think it's in line. I think people will take a while to get back. But my take is that, the bounce back will be very, very, it'll be very big because there will be a fair amount of, quiet for a bit till the vaccine is out. And once the vaccine is out, there'll be a lot of pent-up demand that's going to come out, and there'll be a big, sort of bounce back. But yes, I tend to agree that people are not going to jump onto an aircraft, or on a train in a hurry, unless you're really, really. And there are other, for corporate travel for a minute, I think there are other issues. Companies have liability insurance issues for their executives who travel, and insurance companies are going to put all kinds of conditions and all kinds of stuff. If you're taking a holiday and if you're traveling, and in any case, more than 104, last count, 115 countries have sealed their borders. Yeah. You don't know when those borders are going to open. When they open, what will be insurance norms? What will be your medical insurance norms, etc. So I think for the short term, there's pain in the system. Domestic tourism will pick up, and I think that countries like Sri Lanka have a fabulous opportunity because the extent of the damage done by the virus in Sri Lanka is very, very limited as compared to other countries. So a lot of people will be very happy to go to Sri Lanka because it would be considered to be a far safer destination. So I think Indians, for example, although we are your largest market along with the Chinese, I think the Indians would be sort of looking at getting into Sri Lanka because that's a safe destination to go to. It's international,
almost like a domestic flight, I mean, from
yes,
Mumbai.
It's a short haul flight which people are sort of happy to take, and this is for the benefit of friends like Malik who run those kind of wonderful businesses, boutique hotels. I think those are going to be the beneficiary of this.
So I'd like to ask.
Agree. I mean, yeah.
Sorry.
Can I make?
No, I mean, I fully. Sorry, go ahead, Davinder.
Yeah, so I've seen IATA survey. The IATA survey, they polled international travelers, and they said they are willing to start. 50% said they are willing to start traveling 1 to 2 months after governments relax travel restrictions. So to Mandeep's point, some of those travel restrictions might remain till end of the year, but travelers have 50% have said they are willing to start travel after 1 to 2 months. But at the same time, 40% said they are going to wait for more than 6 months before they start travel again.
So then I don't know whether anybody saw this thing from on the news today. Sicily, is saying that they will pay 50% of your airfare, 1/3 of your hotel stay, and also all admissions to museums and things like that are free. So they're really, yeah. So hey, I'm waiting for the fine print. But this may be the time to go visit Sicily.
Yeah, but Lavi, to your point, I feel like there's a common theme evolving here, and that's how do you sort of lobby or influence government? So one of the things I'd like to ask from the panel is, like, if you were given a clean slate, each of you as industrial leaders, what would be your 3-point plan that you go back to your governments with, to Modi or Gotabaya or whoever? And what would you influence?
What is your ask, right?
Yeah, what is your ask?
If you said, I think Malik said, put money on science, but if you as industry, what would you ask for?
No, but I think, you see, we've all had this lockdown for 4 to 5 weeks, which is a so-called hammer. Now we have the dance. Now there are so many potential scenarios. Do we have a second wave with the onset of the European winter? The lockdown was really to allow the medical services to get on top of the situation, get PPE, testing kits, and contact tracing refined.
Right.
So their work, apart from some countries which didn't really have the lockdown, in many other countries where it was very strict, really it was like stay at home so we can just get ourselves organized for the dance. So the Dance is where you're flexible, you see an outbreak here, community transfer here. So I really feel that what happens after the lockdown is lifted and semi-normalcy returns. So here they're looking at government service 20 to 30% turnout, and they're saying that even though the curfew is lifted, depending on your ID number, if it's an even number, you go out on a certain day, odd number, because they just don't want things coming back to normal. And there is then going to be a period of a very kind of dance to see if what might happen. There might then be another further lockdown. A lot depends, because science and those controls have to work in tandem. So I really feel, looking at the vision for travel, business travel, in my view, you do have temporary substitutes through channels like Zoom and so on. But for holidays, there's no alternative. I fully agree. I think with Mandeep was saying that there is a huge pent-up demand. There's even a concept of revenge travel in China, where people say, we just want to bust up money, book a holiday. And we're starting to promote, saying, okay, this is the package. You can take it whenever you want. So even without dates, they just want to say, we booked a holiday. But I think initially it's going to be local. Road trips are going to come back. Train travel will come back. Then it'll be regional. So the Aussies, for example, as you know, Shanti, are talking about a bubble that includes maybe Fiji, New Zealand, but not really traveling to this part of the world or Europe or anywhere till December, January of next year. So I think the next 6 months is going to be a little bit of a dance in many countries to see how well the lockdown worked. And I think, in terms of coming back to the question about the ask, I think it's mass testing. There's got to be continuous mass testing. We haven't done enough in Sri Lanka. We belatedly ramped up testing about 10 days ago. And also surveillance and using technology in terms of contact tracing, because there is a risk that this thing can come and bite us again before the vaccine, once colder weather comes in. So I think people are going to watch and see how the post-lockdown, because people shouldn't think that the lockdown means the problem is over. The lockdown was simply an opportunity for governments and health services to rebuild themselves for the work ahead. It didn't eradicate the problem.
This is an interesting question, I would say. I definitely would want to get in touch with the government in these times, and especially for industry like ours, which is a service to office industry. And since I look at India as a destination where there will be a lot of opportunity for investment, so to say. And I actually foresee future where there will be a lot of companies who would be wanting to shut shop in China and wanting to invest in India. And that's where one would want to collaborate with Invest India and, with CIA and FICCI in working towards probably giving them these quality spaces which one has invested into. And obviously coming up with more thoughtful reforms as far as liquidity is concerned, because one will have to relook at real estate from a very different perspective altogether. One will have to relook at the leases, because a lot of infrastructure which is there, and there is quality infrastructure, there are marquee buildings which are available, and so much already invested in through the operators as well. So one would look at, I think, a lot of help coming in from new reforms set up, wherein one will have to probably collaborate and look at a win-win kind of a situation for everybody. So that's what I foresee, and I would want as help.
Just because we're at the 4 o'clock time, or close to it, just want to get a check. If there are any panelists who would like to leave because of other commitments, that's not a problem. We're happy to sort of take additional questions. There are two things we want to quickly share and get comments on. The poll results, have you shared that, Karthik, already?
Yeah, so we ran another poll, and I'd just like to bring up the poll results. So we asked our attendees, are you a proponent of working from home as a new norm going forward? And 68% answered yes, and 32% answered no. So again, thoughts from the panel?
So here's my take, although this is not necessarily my area of work or either my expertise. Mona is more adept at answering this. But my take is that this work from home is a bit overrated. And we've all experienced it.
Steven, do you agree?
In the last, whatever, in my case, it's been 50 days that I've been at home. The first thing that I ask all my colleagues during our Zoom calls is that what is it that you're really looking forward to doing once the lockdown is over? And everyone, the single answer I get is to get back to work in the office. So I think this work from home is slightly overrated. It's good for a short period of time or occasionally when you want to do that for a change. Over a long period of time or over on a sort of permanent basis, I think it has a host of challenges. It's not something that's gonna bite for very long. Also, there are other challenges. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in India, and I presume even in the rest of the world, we don't have homes that are conducive to working from home. What if we are all dual income families in the younger population? Both people are working out of home. They have parents living with them. We have small homes. We don't necessarily have the areas identified from where you can work from home. There are a whole lot of host of issues, and I don't think we want to be in each other's hair for so long through the day. We want to get out. We want to meet other people. We want to have the banter that we have in the office, which we were talking about just before we started, which Yash and I were talking about. It's the banter. It's that whole atmosphere that creates all the difference. And home can get to you. It may be our favorite place ultimately, but I don't think that it's something that adds up very well from a long perspective if that's going to become your workplace.
It's interesting. It'd be great to do a age profile of that 60-40 split, wouldn't it? As I approach this, the end of my career, I was definitely in the 40% because, I'll be honest and say that, I used to relish the thought of sneaking 2 or 3 days working from home a month. Now I can't wait to get back to an office because it is that banter. It is, like what we're doing now, that fun time when you're sitting here on your own. You've got, you haven't got many friends around. I think if you look at the whole IBM Yahoo question that came up earlier, it didn't work. Yeah. It didn't work. To get the right levels of collaboration, productivity, innovative thinking, you have to have people working together. Clearly, maybe millennials have got a different skill set than I have, but clearly they do. But it's something that I think we need to encourage. I do think, as soon as there's an opportunity to go back, people will rush in their hordes to go back to an office.
Yeah, Jeevan, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, I think, there's going to be, I think long term, there's going to be a balance, right? As I mentioned earlier. So I think, people are still going to work from home. I don't think that's going to change, but there's going to be times when they want that human connection. They want to work with peers, etc., which I think is a huge opportunity for, co-working spaces and stuff like that. Can you provide that flexible kind of pay as you work kind of environment, right? So you might work, you might stay at home 3 days of the week, but you will come in 2 days, and it's more about, can you provide that experience for that person when they come in? They're able to quickly get that human connection, as mentioned. Can you then provide services on top of that? Just make sure he has his perfect cup of coffee available, etc. So I think it's really along that customer experience and stuff like that co-working spaces have to think about the customer experience and the community aspect. And technology is going to be that enabler that makes sure that we allow them to come into a safe, protected, and also enabling environment.
I tend to agree with Jeevan. So let's say even in our company, we are looking at the same kind of dynamics. We were considering the option of working a couple of days from home and a couple of days at office, and maybe on a co-working space that will allow us to run on OPEX, and that will reduce the cost. If you're really looking at it, since people have learned to work from home, so maybe 2-3 days at home and 2 days at office, so we will be able to shuffle around. So we are very serious looking at it.
So Karthika and I put something together. Karthika, if you want to put up the commercial, the co-working future thing.
Yeah.
No, the future one. Yeah. No, the future one.
Yeah.
You had it before. Go ahead. No. the building in the middle.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So this is actually taking off on what Mona had also talked about, right? So I think one of the challenges, I think what people are saying from working from home is like in India, I know, for example, in the major metropolitan areas, the commutes are terrible, right? I'm sure this is true in LA, this is true in in New York, lots of places. If you take an hour or 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to leave work, right? That's not a very productive day. I don't know how much you cut it. It is a terrible way. So if you are in that kind of a commute situation anywhere in the world, working from home right now seems like a really attractive thing. And I think there's an opportunity here. I think the opportunity is that, co-working has sort of followed the commercial space and essentially gone to the CBD and put their buildings right next to all the commercial spaces. And when we might want to do is not do that, but actually start building offices close to where you live. So you can essentially sort of work from home, but it's a bike ride or a walk to the office, where like in this diagram where we have it sort of a smart office in the middle, which could be managed by JLL, it could be managed by a co-working company, right? You set up all the things, you have the community there. You if you want, you can still work from home for a couple of days, as people have suggested on this panel, or then go in and the husband and wife can, this is a space that you can work for 300 companies in if you so desire, because everybody's working from different places, but everybody's working sort of from this office as opposed to, commuting miles into this. And of course, if we build the rest of the sort of the sustainability around it, urban farms, community hospital, all this new energy stuff. And actually in Delhi, there are places that are already doing this. So maybe the future is that it's co-working or it's flexible office spaces, but those office spaces are not a 2-hour ride away or a tube ride away, which obviously, as Yash said, who wants to get into on a crowded subway if things can go hairy at any time, right? So maybe the answer is that we spread, and there's a real estate commercial boom here that maybe we're not focusing on. And the other thing that we sort of did, and just being who we are, is we put a quick video together based on sort of the new themes of tourism. So I'll let you guys listen to it, and then and this is for Sri Lanka, obviously. So the main point here, I know you noticed that even the stilt fishermen were socially distanced, so were the tea pluckers. I mean, the thing we're trying to communicate here, I think, was that, hey, look, Sri Lanka is, and I think Mandeep said this best, is one of those countries where, you don't have, it's not like Bondi Beach where it's got thousands of people in a beach plunked with each other. We really do have beaches that are essentially, not full of people. So I think this is something, we could use to pivot. We just wanted to throw some things out there just so, there's a future. And I think the future will involve a lot of innovation. Do we have any more questions out there, Kartika, that we want to have the panel opine on?
Yeah, we have a few, Lavi. I'll just pull those up now.
I just want to say, Lavi, something you didn't consider in your vision for the real estate is also, driverless cars and stuff like that as well, which has a huge effect on real estate as well.
Yeah, and I mean, in our research, we found out that Bill and Melinda Gates has something called an omni processor, and it takes solid wastewater, gray water, as well as sewage in there, and it produces biothermal energy, electricity, clean water, and ash that you can use for fertilizer. And these are very, very inexpensive devices that are going out there, and they're now all over Africa. So, if you want to Google that, it's called omni processor, and they're very low cost. So you could sort of do these sort of self-contained communities. Another thing that, even a Sri Lankan company called Sarakitha does, when they deliver their produce, they have a technology called Tracify. You can actually trace, who plucked the vegetables, who packed it, right? And then there are companies like Vega that's doing ozonated water. So you could actually use ozonated water, which has no harsh chemicals. It's just water with ozone, which kills bacteria. So if you say, look, in my hotel, I wash everything that comes into the kitchen with ozonated water, right? I mean, these are not, high costing. We're not trying to boil the ocean with technology, but if you tell the person, hey, look, here's my menu, and if you click on it, it will tell you where your potatoes came from, who plucked it, and when they plucked it, and when it came into the hotel. I think it shows, it's marketing, right? It shows a whole traceability component, right? And so we are keeping track. We know everything that hit your plate, right? These are little things, these are not expensive things, and that technology already exists. So it's a matter of, as Mandeep said, I think both the real estate and the hospitality have been industries that have been laggards in technology adoption, right? So I think that's another thing that we were suggesting is, if you were a co-working space, you could put a wearable device on your wrist, right, that keeps constant monitoring of your temperature throughout, and even if you leave. And contact tracing is seamless. So if somebody does get a fever, you can say, hey, look, who was the person in this building? Where did they go? And that's a seamless process, right? You could also have thermal cameras set up. I mean, there's a whole new panel on the 15th on syndromic surveillance that we're doing, which talks about the privacy and individual rights. But there is technology out there that can track people's body temperature right throughout the hotel. So it's not stupidly scanning somebody because they could get a temperature 25 minutes after you did that. It's the constant sort of surveillance of it. But everybody's assured, hey, look, if somebody, a guest or a person in my office gets a fever, I will know about it, and I will trace you and make this easier. It's a little bit of reassurance. I mean, everybody's risk profile is going to be different.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So just segueing from all of that, Lavi, we have a different sort of a question coming in through the audience member, which I thought would be good to address, where Mohammed Umar says, like work from home, will the education system also change into study from home, and if the panel has any predictions?
I'm guessing, if I may, I mean, I've got a 10-year-old daughter. I mean, it's already started for her. She is, I mean, she definitely wants to go back to school, but, it's definitely there. It was amazing how quickly the school was able to turn around their curriculum and able to provide home working. And it's, from what we can see, it's working well. I'm not sure my daughter enjoys the presence of her mum standing over her shoulder all the time. It's going to depend on the age group, but I can definitely see no reason why that we shouldn't. But certainly when you look at a child's development, they certainly need to be around people.
Sure. And we have a question from Malik from Akil. It was mentioned that the flying industries will cripple and that some companies would go bankrupt. Do you think that the airfare would spike? There was recent backlash about the ticket fare for students and people overseas to return back.
I think pretty definitely. I mean, that backlash was misplaced, because when you send an aircraft absolutely empty one way and you bring them back with a huge amount of controls, obviously the cost goes up. And even then that's a break even or probably a slight loss. But I think a lot depends on this middle, first in business, obviously no significant changes, but it's the middle seat in Y class in economy that's going to have a huge impact. So if airlines have to fly on that basis, definitely economy class fares will go up. Then with the lack of competition, with maybe a third of a quarter, maybe half the airlines going bankrupt, then you have less competition. So I think economy fares will go up. The level to which they go up really depends on what safety protocols are important. Again, once the vaccine comes in, then it could be back to normal, if you could ever call it normal. So yeah, the answer I think is yes, the fares will go up for the next year or 18 months.
Okay. Lavi, do you still want to keep doing questions from the audience?
I would like to ask the panel if they're okay for doing that for another 5 minutes maybe, and then we can, Yash is okay? Okay. Mandeep, you okay with that? Or
I'm good for the next 5 minutes. I have a 5:30,
yeah, great.
5:14 now. So.
Okay, so let's take two quick questions, and then we'll call it.
So we will have a quick question for Fatih from Haya. Can a startup like YokoBed sorry, Yoho Bed or Yoho Mart work from home?
Yeah, I think because we were really planned to do the work from home, because let's say we have a tech component, we have operation component, we have a call center component. So, but we planned it really well to work from home from the next day of lockdown itself. Everyone is working from home. The contribution is great. That actually allowed us to pivot from hotel business to grocery business within a week. And
Wow.
and the decision was taken in a day, and the whole tech build certain things within 24 hours, and we started selling stuff because we want to survive in the market. So actually 24 hours turnaround, but within 1 week we were able to plan our stuff and get it right. So because everything happened when everyone is working from home. We are a 40 people company, and we had acquiring teams, we have sales team, call center team, IT team. So IT team came up front, and they taught everyone how to work from home, and it worked like magic for us.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's great to hear about a quick pivot like that. What's the next question, Kartika?
Yeah, from Karan, from Mona. How are you managing your customers during this period, and what is the message you are sending across to all your customers? And probably Jeevan can chime in as well.
And why don't you put the WeWork slide there for a second?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because this is what another co-working company of this world's largest put up or sent on was on LinkedIn. So
Okay,
this is what
Karan,
they were communicating.
yeah. Karan, what we're doing is obviously we are in touch with our customers regularly, and I think we're keeping all our communication channels open. And at the moment, what is really important is that how is it that we're gonna look towards reopening post the lockdown, and that's where the entire strategy is, where we're working towards probably investing more into how do we need to provide the clients more sanitized environment and health and safety norms and guidelines as per the WHO and health and safety handbook, which has been made primarily. And obviously we've also, in fact, we went across and interviewed a lot of our clients, and we took a small video from all of them, and they're wanting to come back to the workplace because see, by the end of it, we're all social animals. We want to come back. We want to collaborate. We need to chat. We need to have a coffee breaks. That's what is important. Everybody is really looking at coming back at work. The dynamics are such that one needs to partner and one needs to really work together as a team at this moment, along with our in-house clients as well as the developers, who are the landlords basically, since we are the tenants in the buildings. And we need to work towards a way where it becomes a win-win. So that's what we're doing.
Jeevan, you want to chime in? And after that, finally, I have a question for Shashanta.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very, very fortunate. We have a wonderful, supportive community, and we've said, hey, we're in this together. Very similar to Mona's experience. Most of them want to come back and really, have that hatch experience, which has been, just together, that sense of community, that sense of, hey, let's work together to build something greater than ourselves. So I think that experience everyone wants, and we've just been constantly in touch with them, giving them as much value as we can from working from home with, great things like this. And thanks to you guys for enabling that. And I think, going forward, I think we've made sure that once they do come back to work, that they feel safe. So we've now set up a whole bunch of seating in the auditorium, because we don't see our plan is to do a lot of seating in our auditoriums and other spaces, so we can provide workspaces with distance, etc. So to just make them feel safe and comfortable if they do come back, and just welcome them back with open arms, and really then work on a whole other level of service, providing technology, and then maybe enabling that whatever they want to do from home as well.
Sorry,
could I maybe chip in? Can I maybe chip in?
Absolutely, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity to find out what else you can do for your customer, because they all need help. Yeah, and there's all sorts of things like, if you look at the amount of vacant space out there, if you look at big land, institutional investors who've got space, empty space, they're worried about the quality of their assets, how do they maintain their asset conditions. I think there are so many smart technology type solutions out there which could help. So be creative, and I think you could shape something quite special and sustainable in terms of an additional revenue line to help your customer. Not only just the revenue line. Please don't try to profiteer in this time, but provide something which helps them protect their asset.
Yeah. And just before we wrap up, Lavia, a question for Shanta. Early on, you mentioned about enabling people and paying forward. In this sort of situation, how is Plus One sort of helping enable people?
I think it's about supporting people at this time. I think this time more than ever, leaders need support. They need sounding boards. They need people to be there to advise them and share experiences. So we've noticed a huge spike in online coaching and mentoring and leaders reaching out. I think the isolation has created more need for that connect with people. And what we do is to provide that support services to leaders as a sounding board and guidance, and also consulting from through the communication channels we have without being on site. So it's about helping people in their leadership journeys and in their work to be better at it, and also provide them guidance in managing their workforce in the new environment.
Lavi, you want to wrap up? Or?
I have two quick questions for Fatih.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Fatih, just two quick questions. One is, how old is your company? And B, what's the inspiration behind this name, Yoho? And I'll tell you why I'm asking once you answer.
Yeah, okay. This company is for last, we were running for 3 years. And Yoho is Your Holiday by Yoho.
Okay, great. The reason I'm asking is, by the way, I need to, there's a disclosure. I have Yoho registered in India, by the way, as something that I was planning to do in the co-living space.
Okay.
And Yoho stands for Young Housing.
Housing.
Ah,
Okay.
I was very intrigued
Cool.
when I saw Yoho. That's the reason I asked. But
So when you're expanding to India, I know whom.
exactly.
Yeah.
But the great news is
You'll have a home.
I never went ahead and did, unfold that plan, and you're obviously doing a great job. So
Thank
good
you.
luck to you.
Mandeep, you could have a Yoko.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mona, I've been very, very intrigued with both the co-working and the co-living space, and we'll catch up.
Most welcome.
So just Karthika, the last slide, I guess. So thank you, everybody. I think we've maintained some amount of audience participation as well, which was our intention. So thank you all the panelists for taking the time out. It's incredibly hard to put one of these together because there are a lot of webinars going on. So I'm glad you made it. We have a new panel coming up on the 8th at 8 p.m. because a lot of people.
Sorry, it's not at 4 today.
Because there are a lot of people joining us from the west coast of the US. So it's about putting Pandora back in the box, how we can use emerging technologies. So this is about how AI, big data, robotics, biotechnology, something that's close to probably Malik's heart as well. How do we get technologists to really work on this problem so that, look, this is an ongoing pandemic, but all the scientists say that we're going to have a couple more. So this might not be the only lockdown. There may be other lockdowns associated with this pandemic, and there could be future lockdowns. So we got to figure out as a sort of a species what we're going to do about that, and how we're going to use science. And Angela Merkel and these people who use science, the leaders are showing a big difference in how they've done this as opposed to populist presidents and leaders. So I think it's very important that we talk there. And then following this on the 15th will be something on syndromic surveillance, because there's a lot of technology, and so it seems like, okay, all the technologists are very enthused about putting technology out there, but there are, of course, privacy concerns associated with any technology. So we're going to have a panel of lawyers from across the world talk about the legal implications of this. So it should be, two very interesting upcoming panels. And so stay posted, join our Facebook page for updates. But thank you again to Hatch and all the participants today in the audience side, as well as our panelists. Thank you very much.